Hello, everybody. This is your favorite Bronze Age Spider-Man comic book podcast. I am your co-host, Mike-EL, and as always, I'm joined by...
Joshua Murr-VELL, and today we're going to be talking about Spider-Man comics from August of 1982. We're going to start off with The Amazing Spider-Man number 231, then move on to Marvel Team Up 120, and then finish things off with Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man number 69.
Right, and let's start off this week by talking about this stunning cover on Amazing Spider-Man 231.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yes, we have an incredible shot of the Cobra with his legs wrapped around Spider-Man, backlit by the moon. I mean, what do you think of this cover, Josh?
It's so great. The posing, the inks are fantastic. Again, like you said, with the backlight, the moonlight is kind of like seeping around the characters and giving them this really awesome glow. You can tell that it's nighttime. Right. The fact that they're kind of hanging off of the building and the way that the Cobra is wrapped around Spider-Man, it really does look like this snake that's kind of like constricting him.
Exactly.
Even the way his cape is and how he has his arms up, it kind of looks like the head of a cobra when the thing like fans out. Like I don't even know what that's called, but like when their head kind of fans out, it opens up, it has that heart shape,
like when they're getting ready to strike,
right,
or whatever.
So it's fantastic. I really love this cover, right.
And this is during an era now where Spider-Man covers are getting better and better, in my opinion, around this era. 1980, what are we in 82 here?
82, yeah.
Jeez, this is absolutely one of the best. So then we get inside, and I don't know if I was just in a good mood or what, but I really liked this issue. What about you?
Yeah, it was really cool. It was pretty fun. I really like the Cobra, and I really like how he's written in The Amazing Spider-Man, because it feels very Bronze Age. Like, right. It has this like classic comic feel to it, usually the stories, and the Cobra has that same feeling, and I think he fits really well into these stories, how they're written. So I always love when villains have like a good reason for being there and like have unique kind of skill sets, and like they're kind of true to their namesake, right? Cobra does act like a cobra, and his moves kind of dictate that, and Spider-Man has to deal with that with like very specific ways, and kind of has to problem solve around the Cobra's powers. So I really enjoyed this one. I was definitely happy to see him pop up in Amazing again.
Right. And like, okay, so yeah, let's just talk about this story. I mean, classic splash page. We have these two security guards, I think they're security guards, coming through this doorway to like, it's kind of like it says no admittance properties, and we see
it's the police evidence locker.
Right. Okay. And we see what almost looks like Spider-Man perched upside down above the doorway, but it's the Cobra. We're going to find out in a minute. But what a great way to just jump into the story. You know, I love it. So we see them looking around in this storage room, or like you said, it's the evidence room at the police headquarters, and they don't see anything. So then Cobra jumps down. Of course, he takes the time to turn on the light, and then he digs through. And of course, you know, it's just funny how, I don't know, when I think about a police evidence room, I don't think about jewels. I think more about drugs and guns and stuff.
Right.
Whatever. It's a kid's comic. So he opens up this drawer and it scoops out a big handful of jewelry and just dumps it into like this sack, right?
Right.
And then because he's Cobra, he could probably squeeze his body. He goes into like this little storm drain.
It's so small too. Like it's really kind of cool.
Yeah, like in the first panel, they show how small it is. In the second panel, his legs are already through. But I'm wondering, I think the idea is that he's kind of contorting his body a little bit, right?
Right.
So I wish they would have shown him maybe, you know, fitting his body or being double jointed or something. Like almost like the X-Files would have shown, like him bending into the pipes, because then it's cool, because then they cut to a wide shot of like Manhattan with like Central Park, and then they imply that he's crawling his way through the sewers and piping all the way back to his apartment. I think that's such a cool idea, eh?
Yeah, I think that's really smart, and again, kind of adding to this character's skill set and allowing him to do things that only he would be able to do, or at least in a way that he would only be able to do it.
Right. And it's funny. Now, this is what's funny is so then we cut to his like thought bubbles. He's like thinking about the last mission he had or whatever. And he's talking about how he was in partnership with Mr. Hyde. And I actually got to say, I think it was a mistake to do this. And I'll tell you why as we get to it, but I'll tell you why I think it's a mistake, because we flash back. It says, see Captain America 252, whatever, right? But then the story goes forward, and we'll get back to that in a minute. But then we touch base with Peter Parker, and it's kind of cool because we get a classic Spider-Man moment where he's actually had to like recreate or re-sew his costume, right?
Right, and he's been having to do that a lot lately. So they definitely they comment on that too, and it's a really good excuse to kind of bring back this classic costume that it seems like have wanted to kind of bring back.
Right, because he actually says, where is it here? He says something about the material. He's like, I needed a couple new outfits for a long time. The way my old spider suit's been getting shredded lately, I was becoming the amazing Patches Man. So then he actually says, of course, I'd have saved myself a lot of work if I just silkscreened the design on the new bodysuits and let it go at that. Because, even though these are comic books, we don't really know. Are they wearing spandex? I have no idea how they make these costumes. But then he's like, when I found a new supply of flex nylon netting, I just couldn't resist putting the underarm webs back on my outfit. So for those that don't know, back in the early 60s, Steve Ditko used to draw Spider-Man with underarm webbing, almost like wings, right?
Right.
And
yeah, it's almost like a right.
Sorry, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say like it's like small. It kind of goes from like the elbow to his waist.
Right.
And it like I don't know. Like as a kid, I always thought that like it kind of helped him glide.
Sure.
A little bit more like as he's swinging through the city.
They ended up using it in the latest. I think it was Homecoming, Spider-Man.
Oh,
Homecoming,
yeah, they
right?
do. Yeah, I think so.
Absolutely. But I just didn't realize it had been missing. They're implying it's been missing for a while, probably since Steve Ditko stopped drawing Spider-Man. So it's kind of cool that Roger Stern not only brings it back, but he takes the time to explain Peter's thought process of, why he brought it back. I think that's really cool. There's a nice 3-panel sequence of him, like looking in the mirror and kind of flexing, and I don't know, it's just a really cool sequence. I like it. Right.
And like even like stretching it out and kind of testing how it looks. There's this really cool moment where he's looking at it and he takes note of the fact that when he has his arm straight out and you're looking at the webbing straight on, you can't even tell that it's there. It's like a line. It's so thick, like paper thin.
Right.
And then when he like puts his arm the opposite way, it's like the full wing. I think it's so cool, and it really definitely gives you like a moment to kind of see how he works and what he's thinking and what his thought process is for his suit.
And we should have been keeping track, but if you go back, this really reminds me of Roger Stern's issue of Spectacular when they brought back the Ringer and the way the Ringer was explaining his powers. I really then I think Roger Stern might have even done that. I remember one of the first issues of Avengers I had where like the Wasp or somebody was explaining their powers like in their thought bubbles. I just think that's really cool. When you're reading a comic, like I mean, it's unrealistic that they would explain it to themselves, but I still enjoy those sequences.
Right, and I think that the thing that I like about it so much is the fact that like if somebody's like actually describing this, it's not a real thing, right? Like it's not realistic at all. But when you're reading the comic, the character believes it and there's a reason for it happening, so you don't really like think too much about it, and it makes sense, right? Like it makes it that much more believable that the character knows what they're doing. And there is like some sort of logic behind it, whether it's something that would actually happen in real life or not. It's completely believable in this story, and you don't think twice about it.
Right? Yeah. You don't question it. Exactly. Okay, so Spider-Man starts leaping through the air, and now we cut away to a new scene, and this is why I thought that the earlier scene showing Mr. Hyde was a mistake, because here we cut over to the site of the end of the previous issue story where the Juggernaut was buried under all that cement, okay? So when we see this, we see it, it says here, but now the restraining fences are again splintered by a massive figure. Now, I'm reading this, I'm thinking, oh, well, this is the Juggernaut. But then I look and I go, well, it's not really the Juggernaut. And so they keep the identity of this person a mystery, which we'll talk about later. But, well, let's spoil it. It's Mr. Hyde. But but to me, it's like, well, why did they have to have that flashback 2 pages earlier? They could have just cut it out. Like, you don't need to have that, right?
You know, I think it's the fact that they did a full-on flashback rather than just do like a small callback, right? Sure. If they had just like just almost name dropped him and they didn't like physically show panels of a flashback of what happened.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like if just in passing he was like, oh man, I don't want to do that since the last time Mr. Hyde kind of screwed me over, so I'm just going to kind of do things on my own now. Sure. You know, like I don't think it would have been as obvious, and I think that like just planting that seed early on would help with the payoff later with that like switch. But yeah, because they blatantly show you the flashback and there's like a full on like picture of Mr. Hyde in one of the panels. I'll kind of bring it up now. Yeah, it's like 3 pages beforehand on digital page 5. We see Cobra pouring himself a drink, and as he's thinking about Mr. Hyde and what happened, there's like a picture above his head of Mr. Hyde, like this silhouetted. Yeah.
I mean, again, it's a convention of the time, but it would have been prudent to just leave it out.
For sure.
Yeah. But yeah, anyway, we can forgive it. Okay, so we cut away, and now we're back with J. Jonah Jameson speaking to his wife, right? Marla? Yeah, I believe that's his wife. They don't say it's his wife. Maybe it's not his wife yet. Maybe this is just his girlfriend or just a girl. I don't know. But I seem to remember him marrying Marla. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know. People can comment if they want. So anyway, so he's talking to Marla and Lance Bannon.
They're going to meet up with somebody to get some information about the Cobra, I believe. And they're going to go meet up with his informant, and it's Ned Leeds and
Marla,
right. And JJ is kind of a little hesitant to allow her to go, but then Ned says, no, I've got this, like it's completely safe. So they end up being convinced to go, but Betty Brant, who is Ned Leeds' wife.
Yes.
We know from previous issues that they're kind of having some marital trouble, so we kind of jump into that a little bit, and they quickly discuss like they're going through counseling and trying to be more open and trusting towards each other. So when Ned tells Betty this, she kind of trusts him and allows him to go, even though that it's a bad neighborhood and she's kind of scared. As they're leaving, he drops a notebook and Betty can't catch him in time. And when she opens up the notebook or the planner or whatever it is, she sees where they're meeting and she gets a little nervous. So she calls our one of our favorite characters, Deb Whitman, to notify Peter Parker.
Right.
And that's where we catch up with Deb a little bit, and she lets Peter Parker know while he's working on a science experiment for class, and he dons the Spider-Man costume and kind of intercepts Betty. I already forget her name. Marla and Ned.
Right. And so now we get a cool scene of them going to this. Again, this is sort of the grittiness of Roger Stern's Spider-Man, which I really like. I would rather see this, informants and like, dive bars. I'd rather see this than just generic, Dr. Octopus robbing a bank or whatever.
Yeah.
This grounds it a little bit more in reality. It makes it kind of cooler, Just the idea that...
It makes it feel more like a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Like it feels grounded with the characters and the city itself.
Right. And also,
if it's Doctor, sorry, I keep interrupting you, but like when it is Dr. Octopus and it is this like huge thing, it feels kind of more grand than that. Like it feels sometimes world ending, and even if it's like Doc Ock, stealing money from a bank, it's usually to make this super weapon to, do something.
Spider-Man,
right. Where this, it definitely feels like Spider-Man sometimes is kind of like a detective, and he is kind of doing this, like, doing his job to kind of clean up the city and stop crime.
Right. And also, it just reminds me of, like, to me, I like the idea that, like, these characters, like whoever it may be, Killer Shrike or the Cobra, are just sort of like standing in for, if you were to be watching a cop show or reading a cop detective novel, they just happen to be the bad guys. Like they would do the same thing that a criminal would do in the real world. They wouldn't just go wreak havoc to get Spider-Man's attention, which I always thought was idiotic. I like the fact that they're working the same way real criminals do. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So anyway, so they go see this informant, Nose Norton, who I remember as a kid because he has such a funny name. So then they go outside, and all of a sudden, this informant, Nose Norton, is now kind of like backing away from wanting to help them out. So Ned Leeds is getting kind of irritated. Then we see the silhouette of this character walking, who we're kind of it's being implied that it might be the Juggernaut, but we know it's not because we spoiled it already. So then Spider-Man swings in just as Ned Leeds is starting to kind of rough up Nose Norton, and Nose Norton's getting pissed off. And then out of the blue, Cobra jumps down onto Nose Norton, right? Because Nose Norton's going to give information on him, right? Or onto his operation or whatever.
Right.
So Spidey comes in, and then him and Cobra start fighting, and of these gas capsules being shot at Ned and Marla, and then Spider-Man, it's almost like slow motion. He's like running in to catch them and then whip them out of the way. It's a really cool 3-panel sequence, eh?
Yeah, it's really great. I love the poses too. You have Spider-Man diving in, and he's kind of like halfway into the panel, and then the next one, he's got this like a really great like end pose of this huge like arm swing as he's throwing these capsules up into the sky, trying to throw them up onto the roof. It's really good.
Yep, I love it. And then of course the gas explodes up on the roof, and then we see this cool shot of Cobra crawling on the wall above them, and we see like the trail behind him. It's almost like Dracula crawling upside down on the side of the wall. It's a really cool shot. And then Spider-Man's got his web out, and they're kind of, shouting at each other. And then again, he's shooting these gas pellets, which end up hitting Ned Leeds. It's kind of funny because then Spider-Man just jumps to conclusions. I failed Betty again. Poor Ned's dead because you're alive? And it's just funny because, like as if this character would die so easily, but whatever. Okay,
right.
We'll go along with it. So then Cobra drags, he follows Nose into the bar and attacks him while he's at the bar. And then Spider-Man, now he jumps in and is following him. So now they're fighting back and forth. And there's some really cool, really long panels on digital, what is this, digital 20?
Yeah,
and 19, right. Yeah. 19 to 20, where like Cobra's way up in the air and Spider-Man's down, and then we cut to a long shot of Spidey punching Cobra into the air. Meanwhile, the mysterious figure is coming from, like an alley to confront them as they're fighting. And then the next panel, Spidey basically beats Cobra, and then he thinks all is won. But what happens? Someone throws the corner of a building at him, and
what a great panel.
I know, it's so cool, eh? Yeah. So then he jumps out of the way. He's actually protecting Cobra from getting killed as well. And then we get the last page reveal that, guess what? It wasn't Juggernaut all along. It was Mr. Hyde that was on his way to confront them. So that's our big ending. It's a really cool shot of all three of them standing there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really great like final splash page there.
Right.
Yeah, I thought, and you can also see like the building in the background that's missing the corner.
Right.
That was just thrown at Spider-Man. Yeah, it's really great. I love this last page, but I for some reason I really love that top panel of digital 22, where Spider-Man is like in the
building.
like mid jump, his spider sense is going off, and he's like doing almost like a Matrix bend back as he's like dodging this literal building that's being thrown at him as he's got Cobra in his hand, and such like great dynamic poses. Like his legs are all in silhouette because this building is about to crush him. And it's got this like really awesome foreshortening. And yeah, it's really good. I really love that. I think, and like, I don't think that it's not because there's a lot of detail, because there's really not. There's no background or anything. It's the background is completely white. You just have the two characters in the building, but that's what's important, right? And I think the action lines of the building flying towards them, and then the pose that was chosen for the two characters, really, you can really tell that they were in mid swing, and then Spider-Man kind of had to like course correct and stop himself in midair as he's trying to save Cobra. And I really do I love that, because you can tell everything just from that one panel what's going on.
Right, and like you said, there's not a lot of detail, but it's the impression it makes on you. It's such a cool idea. The building, like the corner of a building, like it just shows how powerful Mr. Hyde is, you know? Mm-hmm. And for those that don't know, Mr. Hyde did appear in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Did you know this?
Oh, really? No, I didn't.
Yes, and guess who he was played by? None other than Kyle MacLachlan from Twin Peaks.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, that's
very cool. Yeah. But I think it was one of those things where they didn't call him Mr. Hyde until the very last episode with him. So they kinda, you know how they do that, right?
I hate when they cop out on stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. But anyway, so overall, again, this is to me is a classic issue of Spider-Man. I definitely recommend it, and I'd read it again. What do you think?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I definitely recommend it. And man, this cover alone is so good.
Yep.
So yeah, definitely high recommend for this one.
Yeah, like honestly, this cover is one of the best covers I think we've seen so far from Spider-Man. Absolutely. All right, that brings us to a Marvel Team Up number 120. This is a comic I had as a kid, and I gotta admit, I don't remember anything about it. But once again, possibly because Kerry Gamble's drawing it, I actually really enjoyed this issue. What did you think?
Yeah, it wasn't too bad, and I think again, like the previous issue, it's a self-contained story and doesn't try to be too big. I mean, even the characters and the story that's being told is very like character driven, and there's not a lot of like big action sequences that happen, and it's really just taking it slow with some new characters and interesting characters that normally probably wouldn't have a big focus.
Right.
Again, we see Peter Parker with Aunt May and Nathan at the Restwell nursing home.
Yes.
And we see this old man named Mr. Fortunoff kind of standing by himself, and Aunt May tries to go and console him and tell him to come over and enjoy the party. You know, we're all like having fun and celebrating, and then he kind of sniffs back and is a little bit nasty, and the nurses take him back to his room, and he's kind of venting a little bit about the golden days and how he used to be a superhero, or like an agent, I guess, named Dominic Fortune.
Right. And that's the thing is, like, okay, I don't know much about Dominic Fortune. I'll just say I believe he was created by Howard Chaykin, and kind of a throwback to pulp heroes, but that is all I know about him. So I'm assuming J.M. DeMatteis is just a fan and just decided to use this issue to tell a new story with him, but that's all I know about him.
Right. You know what? I think that this is a really good platform and good way to do a Marvel team up.
Sure.
And a good way to reintroduce this character and kind of pay homage to them. Because it really felt like Spider-Man belonged in the story. Yeah. And it was like if I didn't know any better, I wouldn't have known this was a Marvel team up.
Okay, yeah.
Because I didn't know the character beforehand, and it wasn't like Spider-Man being thrown into somebody else's comic. It just felt like a good Spider-Man story.
Right.
Like almost every single Spider-Man story, the villain or the bad guy has some sort of ties to Peter Parker. Even in the last one, Cobra is this supervillain, and Ned Leeds knows somebody who has information on Cobra. So even from there, it kind of traces back to Peter Parker, not Spider-Man, right? Peter Parker is the one that learned about this tip from Deborah, who learned about it from Marla, from Betty, from, it kind of like goes down the line. So even that, like, it's Cobra himself doesn't necessarily have like any ties to Peter Parker, but through that chain, like he's definitely connected, and it feels right that he would go in and save the day. We don't really get that with Murr-VELL Team Up, though. Like, usually it's just Spider-Man gets thrown in with Wolverine and he goes into a forest, into a castle.
Right.
And they're fighting robots, I guess. Like, it doesn't always make sense. But this one, it really feels like he should be there. Peter Parker is the one that's thrown into the story first, and then from there, Spider-Man has to don the Spider-Man persona and go out and save the day.
Right.
So I think that alone makes this a much better story than what we're used to with Murr-VELL Team Up.
So getting back to the plot. So we're introduced to this funky, I guess he's a villain, called Turner DeCentry. So let's go from there. Lord. So what happens next?
So, okay, when I was reading this, I was like, wow, this is really interesting. I'm super, invested in this story, and then I read Turner DeCentry, and I just had to like stop for a minute.
Yeah.
I was just like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Okay. So we see Mr. Fortunoff.
Yeah.
He's kind of reminiscing about being Dominic Fortune, and he looks outside and he sees Turner DeCentry riding on a tandem bicycle.
Ridiculous.
Which is flying. It's like flying through the skies. He's pedaling, and he has this like weird, like, woman mannequin doll thing, like riding side saddle on the bike. And he's got this like curly mustache and an umbrella, and he's dressed in this green striped suit. And he's got this like, not a bowler hat. What would you call it? It's like a...
I don't even know what you'd call that, but...
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, he's got this like fancy like 30s hat on.
Right.
And Dominic recognizes him as a supervillain, so he puts on the costume once again and takes on the mantle of Dominic Fortune. We got this really cool... a cool couple of panels on Digital 6 where you can see him kind of look behind him to the trunk, and you see Turner DeCentry riding off into the sky with a bike, and then he's digging through his trunk, and there's a really few couple of lines here that are great. Like a snake in reverse, Davy Fortunoff sheds new skin for old, and Dominic Fortune lives again. So really, I think it's a pretty fun panel. We see him back in the costume, and he's putting on his glove. And the next panel, we see him like halfway out the window, and realizes that he might not make the jump. So
I love it.
On second thought, I'll take the stairs. And
but also I love the fact that the first panel he's like thinking to himself. Second panel is silent from the point of view of the ground looking up, and then it cuts to him running. On second thought, I'll take the stairs. I love that sequence. It's great.
Right. It kind of reminds me of the scene in Into the Spider-Verse where Miles is on the roof. Miles is on the roof when he's first testing out his powers, and he's gonna jump. And he's like kind of monologuing to himself, like, you could do this. And he takes a few steps back, and then he looks over the edge, and then it just cuts to the stairwell, and he's walking down the stairs. And then it cuts to the next building, and it's a little bit shorter, and he jumps off of that one. So I think it's so great. It's like that, giving a little bit of a silent beat before the punchline really helps. So you feel that like nothing is said, and I mean, there's no audio, obviously, in this comic, but because it's a one silent panel of him just looking down, it's this, like, drastic camera angle, too.
Right.
Of, like, this like shot looking up the building, and Dominic he's kind of small in frame in the window, and then it cuts to him running out the door. It's so good.
And also, if you took out the bubbles, you could still understand exactly what's going on, right? It's great storytelling. And I gotta say, again, I grew up reading Kerry Gamble or his art in Superman, and I never appreciated him until now about how good an artist he is. So yeah, I'm really liking this. And again, I love Herb Trimpe, but coming off that Herb Trimpe run, we've enjoyed these last 2 issues much more, haven't we?
Yes, yeah, for sure.
There's no comparison. Yeah. So sorry, we can get back to the plot now.
So as he rushes out the building, Peter Parker kind of disappears, and we learn that he's put on the costume and he's going out chasing Dominic.
Right.
We see him catch up with Turner Desentry, and they have a conversation, and Turner Desentry spills his entire motive to Dominic.
Yes.
And it's a little ridiculous. He's created this horn that will target people that are below the age of 60 and essentially kill them. Like he's planning to kill everybody who's under 60. So that way everything can go back to what it was like in the 30s before World War II.
Right.
And it's completely bonkers, and
it's a ridiculous plot.
But it's also not important to the story because we're really focusing on Dominic Fortune and his story and what's going on with him. And you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, this is pretty similar to last issue, because we have Gargoyle talking to the old woman who's ready to kind of die and pass on, and then we also have Nathan, who's Aunt May's husband. I believe they're married at this point, right? Or maybe the fiance. I can't remember.
I think engaged.
Yeah. He's kind of upset because he wants to relive his glory days, and it's kind of this bringing back the old timers, and just because you're old, your age is just a number, and you kind of act how you want to act and be who you want to be. It doesn't really matter how old you are.
Right.
And this kind of has the same tone and feel to it, right? We see Dominic Fortune kind of coming out of retirement, literally coming out of a retirement home and donning the costume once again and saving the day.
Right.
I never really noticed that until talking about it right now.
It makes me wonder if something was going on in J.M. Demetrius's personal life at this time. Someone was dying or sick or something. It must have just been on his mind.
Or maybe something was happening at Marvel Comics when they were maybe somebody was trying to be pushed out.
Could have been.
Right?
Yeah,
maybe maybe one of the older writers or artists was they were trying to be, somebody was trying to push them out to bring in somebody else, or something was going on, so they started writing these stories to kind of protest that.
It could have been.
I don't know. Yeah,
absolutely.
That's
and at the
something
very
to
least,
look into.
It's definitely unusual to write a story that's so centered on elderly people, because most superhero comics focus on young people, but at least it's something different,
Right, and I think it's because the audience is normally very young.
Right.
So it doesn't seem like it would be an easy sell for a story like this.
Right, exactly.
And obviously, you and me looking at this, we would want to see stories like this, but I feel like as a company, it would be a harder sell, right? Because they would probably be worried about numbers and how the issues would sell and if they would resonate with the audience. But I'm glad that they took these risks, because I think they definitely paid off in the long run.
100%.
Whether these issues were successful or not financially or critically, I think that they definitely stand the test of time better than a lot of the other Marvel team-ups.
That's the key. Exactly. We're enjoying them. Again, like we said, it feels like classic Spidey, right?
Right.
So, So anyway, yeah. So then, what happens after this? So Spidey and what's his name are fighting.
Right. So yeah, Spidey kind of follows them because he uses his like ray against
Dominic Fortune.
Yeah, Dominic Fortune, and he realizes like, oh, I'm sorry. What was I thinking? I'm not supposed to use this on people that are older than 60. So then he like takes him to his lab and starts monologuing about what his plans are and shows him like all of his equipment.
Right.
Spider-Man sees them riding off on the tandem bike and follows them to the lab. And just as Dominic Fortune is kind of standing up to Turner, Spider-Man also crashes through the window. We see Mister, the only thing worse than an old fool is a young nut. And you are a wacko. And then Spider-Man crashes through the window and says, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And then, he's automatically hit with this ray and Peter Parker falls to the ground unconscious. And it turns into a fight against Dominic Fortune and Eternity Century. And I think, by the end of the day, that's what the fight is. Spider-Man doesn't Spider-Man does help a little bit, but it's thanks to Dominic Fortune that they, he's able to be stopped, and then Spider-Man ends up swinging at the last minute to kind of tie him up. Right.
It's mostly just Dominic chasing him through the city and finally subduing him, and then he might have a heart attack or something, and so then what's his name?
Right.
What's that? Yeah. He's like his heart. Oh, he's like his heart must have just given out, so he thinks he's dead, and then Spidey shows up, and then subdues him by knocking him into his web. Right.
Right.
Or no, they're still fighting, but then he realizes, no, Dominic Fortune's not dead. He's fine. But he subdues him in his web. But yeah, so it's just kind of funny. Once again, alive, just like Ned Leeds, right? Thought he was dead. He's alive.
Yeah, it's kind of cheap, I think. Like, I don't know.
Right.
I don't think it was a great bit or a great like twist moment. It was just kind of ridiculous and weird for this moment to even happen, but I guess we have to have Spider-Man come in at the end of the day and save the day, right? But
yeah, and the thing is like, this is not a great issue, but I think the big difference between this and like we were saying, the previous run with Herb Trimpe is that I actually enjoy reading the issue, and it's not like, I felt like when I opened up a page that was drawn by Herb Trimpe, again, whom I love, it just felt off-putting. Like, it's almost like not only is the art different, but J.M. DeMatteis has changed his writing style. It's not as wordy. Have you noticed that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not as verbose. Like, you do want to read it, and it's not. I don't know. I'm not sure what the difference is.
Maybe it's the fact that the art and the layout and the panels are just more clear.
That could be it. Yeah.
You're able to get and understand what's happening just through the art and the panels alone. Where maybe before he felt like he had to kind of explain things more because it wasn't properly laid out and the art didn't tell the story.
Yeah, that could be it. I think you're right.
Because there were definitely like certain panels too in previous issues that you're just like, what the heck is going on here? Like, they didn't make sense. The layout was weird. The characters' proportions were off, and
I know,
like, sometimes just didn't make sense.
Yeah, I like I said, I do like Herb Trimpe, but something about
me too.
Him was not fitting, and it's just much better now.
Yeah.
So that brings us to Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man number 69. And once again, we get a little bit of experimentation with this cover where, because we had the Electro one a few weeks ago, and now we've got, it's weird because it's almost like the comic book cover itself has been, what's this called, skewed?
Right, like it's rotated, I guess. Like
it's almost like there's a comic book cover, but the camera of the page has kind of moved back so that it's like the price box and with a picture of Spider-Man is cut off on the left. The top of the comic book is kind of like coming down, and Marvel Comics group is kind of cut off on the top. And the entire page is kind of skewed, and Spider-Man is like on top of it. So it's kind of cool, eh? And the Cloak and Dagger are below him.
It looks almost 3D. Yeah. Where like you can tell that like this tableau, the characters are all there, and the building is there, and like even the logo and the title and the actual background of the cover is also like part of this tableau, and you're just standing off to the side looking at it from a different angle.
Right.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Right.
I don't know how in depth and like thought out that idea was, but maybe it's because you're trying to look at things from a different angle and a different point of view with Cloak and Dagger in this story. Kind of
could be
seeing like two different sides of the story, because Cloak and Dagger in this issue, like they're not really heroes.
No, they're weird. Like they're
kind of antagonists to Spider-Man in this one.
Right,
like it's
anti-heroes,
they're like vigilantes, where because we're following Spider-Man, who is like a true hero. A vigilante is kind of seen as a villain from his point of view and how he deals with things, and we definitely get some conflict with between them, and we kind of bounce back and forth between what Spider-Man thinks is right, which is probably the actual right thing, and then what Cloak and Dagger believe to be the right thing, and taking justice into their own hands. So it's definitely like I don't know how like in depth they thought about it, but it's definitely kind of cool to get the idea that like maybe the theme, like looking at something from a different perspective, is kind of put into the cover. But
absolutely could be that. Yeah, you're right. And the interior art is again excellent. So this is stories by Bill Mantlo. The art inside is by Ed Hannigan and Al Milgrom, and we've got a great opening splash page that once again kind of recalls Will Eisner's Spirit Stories, where Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, is kind of written into the clouds in the sky, and then we see this almost abstract shot of some skyscrapers in the background, and then in front of them is this older style building, this kind of rundown house, like apartment building, and then there's like a abandoned car in front of it, and Cloak and Dagger are in the foreground pointing at the building, and he's like, oh, it's an abandoned school. There, an abandoned school. It's just kind of cool to like, and then you see like the newspaper, pieces of newspaper are blowing in the wind, and it says the credits on the paper, and in darkness seldom seen. It's just really cool.
I really love the attention to detail. I love when they do this in comics, where the titles are like digestive, where they feel like they're part of the actual panels rather than like bubbles just like above and narrating what's going on. It feels like it's part of it, and it's so clever. I love the colors as well in this, like the pink sky. Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, is written in the clouds above the city.
Yep,
it's really great.
Colorist Glynis Wein, which we never really talk about the colorists, but in this case we should definitely mention them.
Yes, for sure.
So we open up with a scene. Now this is a little bit unrealistic, in my opinion, my limited street knowledge, but we've got a bunch of black drug dealers beating up another drug dealer because he didn't want to sell to children, and they're like, what did we tell you? But it's written in very strained attempt at mimicking black slang at that time in 1982, and I don't think it's terribly realistic.
No, it also I was really uncomfortable reading it, like at times, because it just felt very stereotypical, both for the culture and for like, I don't like it felt like a caricature of what something like that would be, where
100%,
everything else in the story feels very realistic, and it just felt kind of out of place having these characters like, I don't know, be cartoons of what they probably should have been.
Totally. Now, to be fair, it's not like these are the only black characters in the comic, because at least Cloak is also black, so he balances it out. But the portrayal of these characters is definitely not good, definitely not great, right? So then now Cloak comes in, and she's sitting in these like theater seats in this old abandoned building, and they all see her, and they're all mesmerized by her beauty. And so she shoots these light. It's kind of cool how their powers work together, because she shoots her light daggers at them to kind of, startle them or whatever. And then Cloak absorbs them into his cloak, right? And it's just kind of cool how their powers kind of work in unison.
Right.
It's nice.
I really love this intro for her too.
I was going to say, how convenient that this random act of nature that gave them these superpowers just happened to work so well together thematically. But anyway,
right.
So anyway, so then these guys are all, they're trying to get away, but like Cloak is absorbing them into his, what is it called? His shroud, I guess.
Right.
Yeah, whatever.
His cape that he has, it's kind of like this, like black hole void.
Right.
Like it goes into nothingness, and it's kind of unclear, I guess, how the power works at this point, but it seems like his abilities, is being able to manipulate like black holes and kind of almost jump into like other dimensions or like pocket dimensions where it's completely nothingness. We saw Spider-Man get trapped in there for a little bit last time we saw them with that was Peter Parker Spectacular Spider-Man number 64, I think.
I think so, yeah.
And so it's definitely a really cool power, and the two of them play off each other extremely well. Right.
And so they're trying to get information. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I love on digital page 6 the some of the paneling at the bottom too.
Right.
After he's been kind of thrown out of the cape, the shroud, like the panel is kind of shattered as they're intimidating these goons.
Right.
It's a really great, really well broken up, and add some character to the story and the panels.
Absolutely, yeah, you're right. I didn't even notice that. Oh yeah, because it's like the framing of the window is the panels. It's kind of cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very cool. Yeah, so they're trying to get information out of these guys. The drugs you've been dealing to children. Where do they come from? Who supplies them? And then the one guy's like, Silvermane. And for those who don't know, Silvermane is one of the Magia, or the Magia, right? The Marvel version of the Mafia. So he's one of the bosses. So that's kind of cool. So then meanwhile, Spider-Man is swinging over Queens, and he's actually going to his old house that he used to live in, when he was like a teenager, when Aunt May and Uncle Ben were still alive. And he's crawling through, and he's looking at stuff, and he's flashing back to his memory of what happened. And then just as he's doing that, outside, a cop goes by. And then Nathan Lubinsky just happens to be going by at the same time. And then I don't remember what happens after this. So then all these cop cars are going by. So then Spider-Man decides to follow them. Mm-hmm. And he ends up... sorry, go ahead.
And yeah, when he runs into Cloak and Dagger, and the art on digital 10 and 11 is, and 12 and 13 are just fantastic. That first panel of Spider-Man on this, like, what looks like a smokestack or like a water tower type thing, and it's pouring out, and he's kind of cast in shadow a little bit. It's so good. And then there's like this panel inside of a panel, and you can kind of see what Spider-Man is looking at. Right. It's outlined in red, I think, both to break up the two panels, but then the red makes me think, okay, this is Spider-Man's POV.
Yeah, so good point. Yep.
It's really kind of cool to see exactly what he's seeing. Right. And he jumps down and starts talking to him and confronts them. And they start fighting because Spider-Man's trying to stop them from going and killing somebody. Right.
Well, it's funny because Spider-Man actually, as he's fighting, he's like, as he's about, like, first he gets kicked in the face by Dagger, And then he like tosses her on her back. And then as he's leaping in the air, he's like, she's so young, so innocent. I want to shelter her, not slug her. You know, it's just kind of funny. I don't know. I mean, it's true, but it's like they are fist fighting. It is a superhero comic. Then all of a sudden he's immersed in darkness. So obviously he's been wrapped in Cloak's cloak, right?
Right.
So he's trapped in there. And they're talking about how he has this power. Where is it? He's like, I cannot envelop one of his powers for long. Or one. Oh, I misunderstood that. He says, I cannot envelop one of his power. Like he's so strong. Okay. I thought it was a specific power. I was like, what specific power do you mean? But anyway, so yeah, he eventually gets out. And then, of course, the classic, so cold, right? Anyone that goes into his cloak is cold. I don't know if it means actual temperature cold or just like his soul has been exposed to the darkness. Like, I don't know exactly what I mean, but it's pretty cool, though.
Yeah, I guess I always kind of took it as like almost like the vacuum of space where it's just nothingness. So it's always kind of cold and dark. Okay.
Yeah, so then Spider-Man, so then they disperse. And Spider-Man goes back to his regular life. He's got his photos, right? Mm-hmm. And he goes back, and he's now in class at the Empire State University, right? And
yeah, we get this.
Oh my God! Another Deborah Whitman scene.
Are you kidding me?
I know.
Poor Deb. The last issue we just read, Deb called Peter Parker to save somebody's life. Like she called him to say, hey, listen, the sketchy thing's going down. I think somebody's going to get hurt. Maybe you can go in and like, you know, tell Spider-Man to go step in and intervene and save somebody's life. And that's exactly what happens. He probably saved Ned Lee's life there, right?
Yep.
And just of course he's got to come in and ruin that and like for no good reason, just like destroy Deb Whitman, this poor girl. Yeah. So we see. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
So we see Deb kind of catch up with Peter, and she starts talking about school, and then Peter Parker just interrupts her and says, Deborah, you made up this story about me making you cry, which caused that Neolithic goon to come after me. I don't have... what does he say? I don't have the time for your fantasies or Biff's fisticuffs.
Right.
And then Deb's, Peter, don't go. I'm not angry with you. Oh, Peter, it's not Biff I care about. It's you. I know your secret. So I guess we know now...
she knows that
she does for sure know. Yeah. Because last issue we see her follow Peter up to the roof, and then Peter's not there, but we see Spider-Man swinging away.
Right.
So it's definitely confirmed now as we see a close up of this magazine that she's holding,
Right.
Yeah, Daily Bugle Sunday magazine, and it's the cover of Spider-Man.
So then Spider-Man is on his way onto the next thing. So now he's going to talk to who is it? Oh yeah, Captain Jean DeWolf. So now they're talking about Silvermane, talking about kind of like trading information about what's been going on, and then basically he's back out. He finds out the Kingpin's back in town, and he goes out to confront the Kingpin. And so now we get a scene. I mean, I love the Kingpin, but I don't like when they make him, not to say powerful, but almost like all-knowing and all-powerful. It's a little bit annoying, but I can accept it because that's the way they portray him. That's fine.
Right.
But I love this page. Like, look at this digital page 16. Like the 5 panels at the top of him landing on the building, then crawling over like the kind of air duct or whatever that is, then crawling through, and like we see almost like a blueprint, almost like a blueprint of the building that he's crawling through, and then he finally makes his way to like this sauna or whatever it is, and the Kingpin's in there, and of course Kingpin knows he's there because he knows everything. You may come down now, Spider-Man, and then they start talking. I mean, it's a really cool sequence. Hey, what do you think?
No, it's really great. I don't know. I don't mind Kingpin being all-knowing when it's not like important to the story. Like when
sure,
because Kingpin's really not the villain right now. So if Spider-Man like story-wise was trying to sneak up on Kingpin or foil his plans, it might be kind of annoying because Spider-Man would never have a leg up on him, and there's no reason for Kingpin to know. But in this instance, just to kind of show how powerful he is as like a one-off kind of thing that happens, I don't know. I kind of liked it where he kind of showed how smart he is, and he is this force to be reckoned with, and he's kind of like setting it up for later. Like, okay, yeah, this guy is pretty crazy. Like he knows what he's talking about. He's dangerous, so it's gonna definitely I think pay off later on when the actual confrontation is Spider-Man versus Kingpin. But yeah, this was really fun.
So yeah, it's a cool scene because sorry, go ahead.
I also really love on the next page when he's kind of talking about the Cloak and Dagger and what happened to them and the drugs that are going on, and it's kind of has this like sepia tone, these few panels.
Yeah, like it's faded out on the side. Yeah, it's really cool.
And then there's this the middle panel with Kingpin telling the story, and then you see the story like happening in the flashback next to him. It fades from that sepia to like regular coloring, so you can tell that he's the one telling the story. It's like just this really cool panel, and I love the way that it's colored. And so Spidey's trying to get information on Silvermane, and basically Kingpin just hands him an address on a piece of paper, right? And Spider-Man's like, you wouldn't be giving me his address in the hope that I'll be knocking out your competition. And like Kingpin says, what you do with the information is your affair. So once again, it's Kingpin just playing chess with everybody, right? So he kind of just manipulating things to his advantage. So, then Spider-Man goes to Silvermane's like mansion kind of, and like breaks in through the window. And then just as Cloak and Dagger come in at the same time, and all his goons are around shooting at them, and Cloak is, of course, capturing them into his cloak, into the darkness. And it's fisticuffs once again, fight scenes, everyone's punching everybody. It's a really great panel, actually. Real quick before we move on page 19, digital 19. There's a really great panel up at the top right where you can kind of see the goons disappear into the cape, into that void. I think it really shows off how the power works and how easy it is for him to just kind of lift up his arms and this void opens up out of the cape and these guys are gone.
Yeah, and again, very Ditko-esque art in my opinion. It's really nice. This whole fight scene is great. And Silvermane is in bed with these tubes attached to him. Basically, he's on death's door, right? Wait, is that the expression, death's door? Death's doorway? Yeah, death's door. I don't know.
Death's door.
Yeah. And so basically now what it comes down to is, we got to talk about this really cool scene. So basically Cloak and Dagger want to murder Silvermane, but Spider-Man wants to stop them. Now there's a really cool panel on page 21 where Spider-Man jumps onto Cloak, and then it's the weirdest thing where we actually have a panel on top of the bottom panel where Spider-Man's like, Cloak teleported again. How does he do that? So it's like, it's almost like a little bit meta, like something Grant Morrison would do, where it's almost like the panel is the reality.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it's so weird the way they do it, but it's really well done.
Yeah, it's really great. Like the panel is askew and like rotated about like 45 degrees off, and it's like in between Spider-Man on Cloak's back and then being teleported to another area. So the panel is like just as discombobulated and like out of focus as Spider-Man is and confused, right? It's yeah.
It's like,
really great storytelling through the panel.
It's not as experimental as something like Frank Quitely would have done later on, like something like We 3, but it's definitely something you don't see every day in a Marvel comic in the 1980s, right? It's really cool.
I don't even know like if it's that experimental to me. I feel like it's just a great way to tell a story through the panel art. You know what I mean? Like it's purposeful.
It's not showing off. It's definitely it's like he figured, okay, I got to show this. How am I going to do this? And it's like the storytelling came first, right? Yes. He had to tell the story, and this is how he did it. And it's great. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So then he basically, Dagger tries to kill Silvermane with her daggers, and Spider-Man jumps in front of them to stop them. And then, Dagger's like, Spider-Man, I didn't mean to. And then Cloak's like, he brought misfortune upon himself. It's time to deal with Silvermane. And then Silvermane activates, what is this? Like flames of death. He shoots fire and almost burns Dagger, but Spider-Man kind of like pulls her down. But then Cloak, enough, old man, your time has come. And Dagger's like, you saved my life. If that means you owe me, then I'm calling in the chips. But then it doesn't matter. Don't become a killer. Don't murder Silvermane. But guess what? It's too late. They murder him, right?
Right.
We don't. And then Cloak says, we have no time to argue. It is time for our duty to be done. Kill him. And then Dagger kills Silvermane. That's it. And then they walk away, and Spider-Man's like, no, Cloak, you forced her to become a murderess. It's all your fault. No, Spider-Man. In the end, Cloak's desire was the same as my own. The end justifies the means. A great evil has passed, and this episode's ended. Farewell. And then it's kind of creepy, because then as they leave the room, we see Silvermane, all of his like life tubes or whatever, dripping blood all over the floor, right? And then Spider-Man's like, Cloak thinks it all ends here. He's wrong. Dead wrong. And then it says to be continued next month.
Yeah. That pose of Spider-Man, like just standing there with his hand on the bedpost. Like he's in this extremely like straight on flat pose. He's standing completely still. His arms are at his side, and you could tell how like just shocked and sad he is.
Right.
And like disturbed almost at the sight of what had just happened.
Right.
It's really great.
And that's again, for people, if there's younger people that are looking at this art and they think it's like, I guess, unpolished or ugly, they just got to realize it's all about the story. And that's why we're raving about this art. It's so good. So yes, another classic gritty issue of Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man. I would definitely recommend it. What about you?
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm really loving these stories with Cloak and Dagger.
Right.
They're both really good.
Yeah. Like we're in the middle of a classic run by Bill Mantlo and Ed Hannigan. And honestly, I don't hear too many people talk about this run. So it's kind of like a hidden gem, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess that wraps up this week's episode of Here Comes the Spider-Cast. Every week we review 1 month's worth of Spider-Man comics. So next week we're going to be doing Amazing Spider-Man 232, Marvel Team Up 121, and Spectacular Spider-Man 70. And you can take it from here, Josh.
Yeah, if you guys want to keep in touch and contact us, you can find us through the Comic Book Syndicate on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, pretty much anywhere that you can listen to podcasts, you can find us there. Don't forget to look us up on our YouTube channel as well. And if you want to contact us through Twitter, you can find us at Comic Syndicate. We'd love to hear from you guys. We want to know what you guys think about the episodes that we're putting out, and we also want to know what you guys think about the issues we're reading too. So please stay in touch and let us know what you guys think. We want to keep that conversation going.
That's right. So until next Monday, this has been Here Comes the Spider-Cast.
All right. See you then.